Bradley Hayes slammed the heavy leather portfolio onto the sleek terminal desk, the sharp crack echoing across the crowded departure gate like a gunshot. He leaned forward, his gold Patek Philippe catching the harsh fluorescent lights, and glared at the young man standing before him. "Let's be realistic here," Bradley scoffed, his voice dripping with practiced contempt, so loud that every passenger in the surrounding rows turned to look. A black man dressed in a faded leather jacket and carrying a battered old backpack doesn't belong in the priority boarding lane. People like you belong in the secondary security line being thoroughly searched, not sitting in a first-class seat on my corporate dime. Malik Vance stood perfectly still, his knuckles turning ash white as his hands tightened around his backpack straps. Bradley chuckled, turning to the passengers behind him, inviting their judgment. Look at him. He probably maxed out a stolen credit card just to sit next to actual taxpayers. Or did you get this luxury ticket through some neighborhood welfare scam, huh? Be honest, sweetie. Did you think washing dishes or whatever it is you do gave you the right to breathe the same clean air up front as people who actually built this country? Hand over the pass, or I will have security escort you out into the street where you belong. Malik didn't say a word, but the silent storm in his eyes caught the attention of a frail old woman sitting in a sawn wool cardigan near the window. She watched every single second. Bradley thought he had won. He thought his status made him invincible. He had no idea that the silent old woman was about to dismantle his entire life. Before we reveal the unbelievable twist that shook the entire aviation industry, don't miss a single second of this incredible journey. Drop your current city and local time in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button right now to join our global community for daily stories that restore your faith in justice. Let's begin. To understand how Malik Vance ended up standing under the suffocating weight of Bradley Hayes' insults at Terminal 3, you have to look exactly 14 days into the past. Malik was 29 years old, a brilliant aerospace materials engineer, living in a drafty two-bedroom apartment on the edge of North Philadelphia. For 5 years, he had survived on overtime hours, black coffee, and the fierce determination to keep his 14-year-old sister, Vanessa, safe. Since their parents passed away in a highway accident 3 years prior, Malik had been her sole guardian, her protector, and her provider. Vanessa was a bright girl who dreamed of studying astrophysics, but her immediate reality was confined to a pair of heavy aluminum crutches. She suffered from severe congenital femoral focal deficiency, a structural bone misalignment that caused intense daily pain and prevented her from walking more than 10 steps without collapsing. The specialist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia had thrown down the gauntlet. A highly specialized orthopedic reconstruction surgery could fully restore her ability to walk. The price tag was exactly $45,210, a sum that might as well have been $4 million to a young engineer working at a small-tier local repair hangar. Malik's insurance repeatedly denied the claim, classifying the intensive procedure as elective structural rehabilitation. Malik did not cry. He simply took a second job, working the night shift from 10:00 p.m. to 4:00 a.m. as a diesel mechanic for commercial transit buses, washing his grease-stained hands in freezing water before returning home to make breakfast for Vanessa every single morning. Then, on a humid Tuesday morning at exactly 8:14 a.m., the miracle arrived in his email inbox. Subject: Invitation to Final Selection Chief Innovation Officer. Office of the Executive Board, Sterling Aerospace, Chicago. Malik had submitted his research thesis on lightweight composite polymers to their blind talent portal months ago, never expecting a reply. Sterling Aerospace was a massive, highly secretive, multi-billion-dollar global entity with defense contracts spanning 3 continents. The starting salary for the position was exactly $350,000 per year, accompanied by a comprehensive executive healthcare package that would fully cover Vanessa's surgery within 24 hours of his signing the contract. It was the golden key to saving his sister's life. The final round panel interview was strictly scheduled for Friday morning at 9:30 a.m. at the Sterling Tower in downtown Chicago. The corporate recruiter had sent an automated booking portal link, but due to a widespread commercial transit strike in the Midwest, standard flights were evaporating rapidly. To guarantee he wouldn't arrive exhausted or delayed, Malik made a heart-wrenching financial decision. He drained his entire emergency bank account, which held exactly $1,420, to buy a last-minute, one-way first-class ticket on Delta Flight 1104, departing Philadelphia International Airport at 8 a.m., 15 a.m. on Thursday. After the transaction cleared, Malik had exactly $16.42 left in his checking account. He had no safety net. He had no backup plan. On Thursday morning, the rain was coming down in thick, gray sheets over the tarmac. Malik ironed his single charcoal gray interview suit using a borrowed iron from the elderly neighbor down the hall. He packed his resumes into his faded high school backpack, kissed Vanessa on the forehead, and told her that the next time he held her hand, they would be planning her surgery. He arrived at Philadelphia International Airport 3 hours early, his heart beating a frantic rhythm against his ribs. But the world does not judge a man by the contents of his soul or the depth of his sacrifices. It judges him by the shade of his skin and the clothes on his back. As Malik approached the main TSA security checkpoint at 6:12 a.m., the atmosphere changed. Ahead of him in the priority lane was Bradley Hayes, wearing a pristine, tailored navy suit that screamed Wall Street, a heavy wool overcoat draped over his arm. Bradley glided through the metal detector. As he did, the conveyor belt scanner emitted a sharp beep from his designer leather carry-on bag, a clear violation of the standard 3-4-ounce liquid limit, visible as 2 large bottles of expensive cologne. The TSA agent, a middle-aged man with a tired expression, looked up at Bradley, chuckled softly, and waved his hand. "Don't worry about it today, sir. Have a safe flight to Chicago." Malik stepped forward next. He placed his old backpack and his worn leather jacket onto the plastic gray bin. He walked through the metal detector smoothly. No beep occurred. The machine remained completely silent. Yet, the same TSA agent suddenly stepped directly into Malik's path, his hand resting firmly on his heavy tactical belt. "Step aside, sir. Random secondary selection. I need you to pull up your shirt and step into the full-body scanner." Malik froze, his chest tightening as he glanced at the wall clock. "Officer, I passed the metal detector completely. My flight starts boarding soon, and this is the priority lane." The officer's expression went completely cold, his voice dropping into a harsh, authoritarian tone. "I don't care what lane you think you bought your way into. People who dress like you and carry bags like that are a high-level operational risk. Move to the secondary screening area now, or I will have you detained for non-compliance." From 5 feet away, Bradley Hayes paused by the conveyor belt, collecting his expensive cologne. He turned his head toward Malik, a slow, mocking smirk spreading across his face as he adjusted his gold Patek Philippe watch. Bradley didn't say a word out loud to the officer, but his eyes communicated a heavy, shared understanding. He shook his head in disgust, grabbed his bags, and strolled effortlessly toward the airport lounges. For the next 45 agonizing minutes, Malik was subjected to a humiliating, meticulous search. The agents unzipped his old backpack, turning it upside down until his carefully printed resumes scattered across the dirty gray table. They searched the lining of his leather jacket, checked his shoes twice, and forced him to stand spread-eagle in front of dozens of staring travelers. Malik felt the heat rising in his neck, the raw, burning injustice threatening to choke him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He knew that one wrong reaction would destroy his sister's only hope. By the time they cleared him with a cold, unapologetic nod, Malik had lost 45 precious minutes. He frantically gathered his papers, stuffed them into his bag, and began to sprint through the sprawling terminal toward Gate C-19. He had no idea that the nightmare had only just begun. The air inside Terminal 3 was thick with the smell of damp wool, spilled coffee, and the collective anxiety of hundreds of stranded passengers. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the storm had escalated into a full-blown northeastern deluge. Lightning ripped through the dark, swollen Philadelphia sky, and the thunder rattled the massive metal roof of the airport. Malik Vance sprinted down the concourse, his dress shoes slipping slightly on the polished terrazzo floor, his lungs burning with every breath. His old backpack bounced heavily against his shoulders, the charcoal suit he had ironed so carefully now clinging to his skin with nervous sweat. He checked his phone. It was exactly 7:42 a.m. Boarding for Delta Flight 1104 had already begun 10 minutes ago. If he didn't make it to Gate C-19 within the next quarter of an hour, the heavy glass doors would seal shut, taking his future and Vanessa's surgery with them. As Malik neared the heavy bank of escalators that led down to the lower departure levels, a sudden commotion broke out near the crowded moving walkway. Travelers in expensive business suits and families dragging large rolling suitcases were swerving violently to the left, their faces tight with annoyance. Nobody stopped. Nobody slowed down. They simply treated the obstacle in front of them like a piece of discarded trash on a busy highway. Malik slowed his pace, his eyes adjusting to the bright fluorescent lights. There, collapsed on the cold, hard floor near the metal base of the escalator, was an elderly woman. She appeared to be in her mid-70s, her frail frame enveloped in a faded, oversized beige wool cardigan that had holes near the cuffs. Her thin silver hair was unkempt, and her pale blue eyes were wide with a terrifying blend of confusion and panic. She was wearing simple, scuffed, orthopedic shoes, and her small, worn faux leather purse had fallen open. A white plastic prescription bottle had shattered upon impact with the metal flooring, sending dozens of small, vital heart medication pills scattering into the path of the oncoming crowd. A heavy, fast-moving businessman in a black trench coat marched right past her, his heavy leather boot crushing two of the pills into white powder without even looking down. "Get out of the way, old lady," a voice yelled from the moving walkway. "Some of us have actual places to be." The elderly woman was trembling violently, her hands shaking so hard she couldn't gather the remaining pills. She looked up at the sea of passing faces, her voice a faint, desperate whisper that was completely swallowed by the roaring airport speakers. "Please, my medicine. I can't breathe. Someone, please help me find my ticket." Malik stopped dead in his tracks. He stood exactly 10 feet away from her. He looked down at his phone. 7:46 a.m. The gate was less than a 2-minute run away. If he turned his back right now, he would walk onto that plane, ace the interview, and secure the $350,000 salary. He had given up everything for this moment. He had drained his account to $16.42. He owed his sister everything, but as he looked at the frail woman trembling on the floor, an image flashed violently across his mind. He remembered his mother, years ago, working late-night shifts cleaning office buildings, her hands cracked and bleeding, collapsing in a public transit station while wealthy commuters walked past her like she didn't exist. Malik remembered the promise he made over his mother's casket, that he would never let the cruelty of the world change the fabric of his character. The internal conflict ripped through his chest like a physical blade, but it took exactly 3 seconds for his soul to make the choice. Malik let go of his backpack straps. He dropped his bag to the floor and knelt down directly into the path of the rushing commuters, creating a human shield between the elderly woman and the cold, unyielding crowd. "Ma'am, it's okay. I've got you," Malik said, his voice dropping into a calm, steady register, despite the panic roaring in his own chest. He began gathering the unbroken pills, placing them carefully back into the plastic container. The woman's hands were ice cold as she clutched Malik's forearm, her breathing ragged and shallow. The room. "It's spinning, young man. I don't know where my boarding pass is. They told me I have to leave. Look at me, ma'am. Breathe with me." Slow down, Malik instructed, inhaling deeply to show her the rhythm. He reached into her open purse, gently sorting through a clutter of old coupons and old tissues until his fingers wrapped around a crumpled, torn piece of paper. It was a standard economy boarding pass for a regional flight to Street, Louis, but the departure gate was on the completely opposite side of the airport, and the flight was scheduled to leave in less than 20 minutes. She was completely lost, suffering from severe anxiety-induced vertigo. Malik knew that if he left her here with the airport staff or a busy terminal medic, she would be processed like a vagrant, delayed, or ignored. Her condition was critical. He gathered her small bags, slid his strong arm under her fragile shoulders, and gently lifted her off the cold floor. "I'm going to take you to the airport medical clinic right now, ma'am. You're safe with me." As he hoisted her up, a sharp chime rang through the high-vaulted terminal speakers. The gate agent's voice cut through the air like ice. "This is the final boarding call for Delta Flight 1104, with nonstop service to Chicago. All confirmed passengers must be on board. The aircraft doors are closing in exactly 3 minutes. Repeat, the doors are closing." Malik looked down the long corridor toward gate C-19. He could see the bright digital sign flashing his flight number. He could see his sister Vanessa's face in his mind, waiting for the phone call that would change her life. Tears gathered at the corners of his eyes, but he looked down at the frail woman, leaning her entire weight against his chest, her heart fluttering like a trapped bird. He closed his eyes, swallowed the bitter taste of defeat, and turned his back on the gate. He chose to walk in the opposite direction, toward the medical wing, fully aware that he was throwing his own life into the abyss to save a stranger. The walk to the airport urgent care clinic took exactly 12 minutes, but to Malik Vance, each step felt like a mile-long march to his own execution. He carried the elderly woman, whose name he discovered was Beatrice, half supporting her weight, as they navigated the labyrinthine hallways of Philadelphia International Airport. When they finally crossed the threshold of the small, sterile medical room, Malik gently placed her onto a vinyl cot. The on-duty nurse, seeing the woman's pale face and erratic breathing, immediately rushed forward with an oxygen mask. Within 10 minutes, the medication began to stabilize Beatrice's heart rate. The terrifying color faded from her cheeks, and her breathing settled into a quiet, rhythmic hum. She sat up slowly, her faded blue eyes clearing as she looked at the young man standing by the door. Malik was staring out the small interior window, his face a mask of silent devastation. He had just checked his phone. It was 8:16 a.m. Delta Flight 1104 was already in the air, climbing through the storm clouds toward Chicago. His interview slot was gone. His career was shattered. The money for Vanessa's surgery was completely lost. Beatrice reached out with a trembling, wrinkled hand, her fingers catching the sleeve of Malik's jacket. "You missed your plane because of me, didn't you, young man?" Malik turned around, forcing a soft, reassuring smile onto his face, despite the hollow ache in his chest. "Don't worry about that, ma'am. The only thing that matters right now is that your heart is steady and you're safe. The airline can always find another flight for me. Careers can be rebuilt, but lives can't." Beatrice stared deeply into Malik's eyes, her gaze sharp, piercing through his weary exterior with an intensity that didn't match her frail, shorn appearance. She didn't offer a dramatic speech of gratitude. Instead, she reached deep into the pocket of her faded beige cardigan and pulled out an old, heavily scratched plastic keychain. Attached to it by a split ring was a single, heavy brass key covered in dark spots of rust and wear. The key looked prehistoric, like something meant for an old grandfather clock or a forgotten cellar door. She pressed the cold metal into Malik's palm and closed his fingers around it with surprising strength. "Take this, young man," she murmured, her voice steady and deliberate. "The world thinks that value is measured in gold watches and tailored suits. They are fools. This key opens what truly matters. Keep it in your pocket today. Do not lose it." Malik looked at the rusted key. slightly baffled by the strange gift. But out of sheer respect for her age, he nodded quietly. "Thank you, ma'am. I'll keep it safe." He slipped the heavy piece of metal into the inside pocket of his jacket, right next to his broken heart. He stayed with her until the airport transit assistants arrived with a wheelchair to safely escort her to her rebooked gate for Street Lewis. As they wheeled her away, she turned her head back one last time, giving him a slow, knowing nod that lingered in his mind. Once she was gone, the heavy silence of reality crashed down upon Malik. He walked out of the clinic and headed back toward the main terminal concourse, his mind spinning out of control. He had to rebook his ticket. He had to find a way to get to Chicago, even if he arrived a day late, just to beg the HR team at Sterling Aerospace for a rescheduled 5-minute conversation. He pulled up his mobile banking app. The screen glared back at him, a brutal reminder of his sacrifice. Available balance, $16.42. He approached the Delta customer service counter near Gate C-19, his feet dragging. The terminal was still crowded with angry, delayed travelers. As Malik stood in the line, his mind racing, a shadow fell over him. He smelled the expensive cologne before he heard the voice. "Well, well, well. Look who crawled back from the trash heap." A loud, mocking voice sneered from behind him. Malik turned his head slowly. Standing there, holding a fresh cup of premium Starbucks coffee, was Bradley Hayes. The senior executive looked immaculate, his tailored suit completely unbothered by the morning chaos. He had been delayed on a later corporate flight due to the weather, and finding Malik back at the gate seemed to provide him with immense amusement. "I knew it," Bradley laughed out loud, making sure his voice carried over the din of the terminal so that the surrounding passengers turned to look. "The agents threw you out, didn't they? I saw you sprinting off with that ridiculous sob story about helping some old street wanderer. Let me guess, you thought playing the Good Samaritan would get you a free voucher or a pity upgrade to first class? People of your color always have some elaborate hustle running." Malik's jaw clenched so tight, his teeth ached. He kept his eyes fixed on Bradley, his voice remarkably flat and controlled. "A human life was in danger, sir. That is more important than any flight." Bradley stepped closer, his face twisting into a mask of pure arrogance. "Don't preach your poverty ethics to me. You missed the flight because you don't belong on it. You don't belong in the corporate world, and you certainly don't belong in Chicago. Look at yourself. Your suit is garbage, your bag is trash, and your account is probably in the negatives. Go back to whatever neighborhood you came from, and leave the real travel to people who actually matter." With a vicious, deliberate flick of his wrist, Bradley tilted his hand, pouring the remains of his scalding hot black coffee directly onto Malik's backpack, soaking his remaining resumes in dark, bitter liquid. "Oops, my hand slipped. Consider it a lesson in social hierarchy." The dark, hot liquid soaked instantly through the cheap canvas of Malik Vance's backpack, ruining the last remaining copies of his life's work. Bradley Hayes stepped back, a cold, mocking laugh escaping his lips as he pulled a silk handkerchief from his breast pocket to wipe his own fingers. "See to it that you clean that up," Bradley sneered, his voice projecting across the crowded gate area. "We wouldn't want people slipping on your mistakes." Before Malik could even process the burning outrage in his chest, Bradley turned to the 2 airport security officers standing near the podium. His face transformed into a mask of calculated, elite concern. "Officers, I need assistance immediately. This man has been loitering around the priority desk for the last hour. He just tried to aggressively reach into my coat pocket to grab my wallet, and when I deflected him, he deliberately knocked my hot coffee over. Look at his bag. He's clearly distressed, hostile, and looking for a target." The 2 officers, seeing a prominent executive in a tailored suit, pointing a finger at a young black man in a damp leather jacket, didn't hesitate. They didn't ask questions. They didn't look at the security cameras. They stepped forward aggressively, their hands instantly unclipping the security straps on their tasers. "Sir, keep your hands where we can see them. Turn around and face the wall immediately," one officer barked, his voice booming through the terminal. "Officer, "That's not what happened," Malik said, his hands raised in the air, his voice trembling not from fear, but from the sheer, suffocating injustice of the moment. He poured the coffee on my bag. "There are witnesses. Shut your mouth and move to the wall now." The second officer slammed his hand onto Malik's shoulder, twisting him around with unnecessary force and forcing him against the cold glass window. The surrounding travelers instantly moved away, pulling their children close, staring at Malik as if he were a violent felon caught in the act. Nobody spoke up. Nobody came to his defense. Bradley Hayes simply watched the display with a smug, satisfied grin, adjusting his heavy gold Patek Philippe watch before picking up his designer briefcase. "Do society a favor and keep him locked up until my flight leaves," Bradley told the officers smoothly, walking past the scene toward the boarding bridge without a single glance back. Malik was marched down a series of gray, windowless service corridors into a cold, isolated airport security interrogation room. For 2 agonizing hours, he was forced to sit in a metal chair while supervisors checked his identification, ran background checks, and reviewed his credentials. He repeatedly begged them to check the gate cameras, but the bureaucratic gears turned with agonizing slowness. It was exactly 10:18 a.m. when a senior supervisor finally walked into the room with a flat, unapologetic expression. The camera footage shows the coffee was an accidental spill by the other passenger, and there was no physical pickpocket attempt. "You're free to go, Mr. Vance." No apology was offered. No compensation was given for his ruined bag or his missed life-changing opportunity. When Malik walked back out into the main terminal, his phone buzzed violently in his hand. It was a text message from the automated HR system at Sterling Aerospace. "Mr. Vance, due to your failure to appear for your scheduled flight check-in and pre-interview brief, your application for Chief Innovation Officer has been marked as abandoned. The selection panel will proceed with other candidates." Malik sat down on a cold plastic terminal bench, his head buried in his hands. He felt a tear slip through his fingers. He had failed Vanessa. His checking account held exactly $16.42. He didn't even have enough money to buy a train ticket back to his neighborhood, let alone a new flight to Chicago to beg for mercy. He pulled out his phone, his fingers shaking as he prepared to call his sister to break her heart. But as he unlocked the screen, a bizarre advertisement popped up on a regional travel forum. It was for a private experimental interstate transport service called Hyper Transit Express Line. The ad read, "Philly to Chicago Direct, Breakthrough Turbine Technology, Emergency Commutes. Departures at 11 a.m. daily. Flat rate, 5 Malik blinked. A bus ride from Philadelphia to Chicago was over 750 darm. It normally took 12 hours of grueling driving through multiple states. But the ad explicitly claimed that by utilizing a new, restricted access commercial highway corridor and advanced twin-turbine engines, this special express bus could complete the entire journey from Philadelphia to Chicago in exactly 3 hours flat. It was completely impossible, a mathematical and physical absurdity that defied every law of standard transportation. Anyone with an elementary understanding of geography would look at the claim and laugh. But Malik was a desperate man with exactly $1.42 left over if he bought the ticket. He had no other choice. He ran out of the terminal, caught the airport shuttle to the lower industrial depot, and handed his last $15 to a driver sitting inside a sleek, matte black bus that looked more like a wingless commercial jet than a public vehicle. At exactly 11:00 a.m., the doors sealed shut with a heavy hiss. The turbine engines roared to life with a high-pitched scream, and the vehicle blasted out onto the restricted interstate lanes, tearing through the rain at speeds that regular drivers would find completely terrifying. Malik leaned his head against the vibrating glass window, his hand clutching the rusted brass key Beatrice had given him, praying that the laws of physics would bend just enough to save his family. The sleek, turbine-powered vehicle screamed to a halt outside the grand plaza of the Sterling Corporate Tower, in downtown Chicago at exactly 2:00 p.m. The impossible 3-hour journey across 3 states had left Malik's head spinning, his body deeply exhausted from the extreme, unnatural speed. He stepped out onto the windy sidewalk, the freezing Chicago air hitting his face like a physical slap. He looked up at the building. The tower was a staggering monolithic structure of black glass and polished titanium that rose 40 stories into the gray Midwestern sky, its summit disappearing into the rolling clouds. This was the epicenter of global aerospace technology, a place where multi-billion-dollar decisions were made every hour. Malik walked through the high-security revolving glass doors into the main lobby. The interior was vast, lined with flawless white marble, and flanked by silent security personnel wearing tactical earpieces. He caught his reflection in the polished surface of a giant structural pillar, and his heart sank. He looked completely out of place. His charcoal suit was deeply creased and rumpled from the high-velocity bus ride. His leather jacket was stained with dried, dark patches of Bradley Hayes's coffee, and his old canvas backpack was visibly frayed at the seams. His hands were trembling from a lack of food. He hadn't eaten a single thing in over 14 hours. He walked up to the heavy, circular reception desk, trying to smooth down his hair and adjust his tie. The receptionist, a young woman with a sharp, severe expression, looked up from her screen. Her eyes immediately raked over Malik's appearance, her nostrils flaring slightly as she took in his stained jacket and old shoes. Her nameplate read Chloe Vance, no relation to Malik, but her demeanor made it clear she belonged to a completely different world. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat, cold, and entirely devoid of professional warmth. "Yes, ma'am," Malik said, forcing his voice to remain steady and polite. "My name is Malik Vance. I am here for the final round selection panel for the Chief Innovation Officer position. I know my flight was severely delayed, but I traveled through the night to get here. I just need 5 minutes with the HR team to explain." Before he could even finish his sentence, a sharp, condescending chuckle cut him off from behind. "Well, look what the cat dragged in from the gutter," a familiar voice sneered. Malik turned around, his body going completely rigid. Standing near the executive elevator bank was Bradley Hayes. He had arrived an hour earlier on his luxury corporate flight, completely rested, his navy suit immaculate, a gold-rimmed folder tucked neatly under his arm. Beside him stood a senior HR director, a severe-looking woman with sharp spectacles named Cynthia Vance. Bradley walked over to the desk, his eyes dripping with pure malice as he looked Malik up and down. "Cynthia, this is exactly what I was warning you about on the phone from Philadelphia. This is the individual who was arrested at the gate for trying to steal my property. He's an absolute fraud, who somehow managed to bypass the initial blind algorithm. He doesn't even have an active appointment anymore." Cynthia looked at Malik with deep disgust, her mouth tightening into a thin line. "Mr. Vance, your application was officially terminated 2 hours ago when you failed to report to the airport transit coordinator. We do not tolerate unreliability at Sterling Aerospace, and we certainly do not interview people who arrive looking like they just crawled out of a public transit terminal. Ma'am, please." Malik stepped forward, pulling the damp, stained folder from his backpack. He opened it, revealing the resumes that were partially wrinkled and discolored by the coffee. "My research on lightweight composite polymers won the National Innovation Prize. My technical qualifications are fully verified. I only missed the flight because I had to assist a critically ill woman at the gate." Cynthia didn't even reach out to touch the folder. Instead, she raised her hand, snatched the damp papers out of Malik's hand with a swift, violent motion, and walked over to the large, designer metal trash can sitting beside the reception desk. With a cold, deliberate look directly into Malik's eyes, she threw the entire stack of resumes into the garbage. "Let me make this perfectly clear to you, Mr. Vance," Cynthia said, her voice carrying across the silent lobby so that every security guard heard her words. "A person of your background and your appearance does not belong in the executive suite of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. We are an elite aviation institution. We do not hire people who look like they belong on the maintenance crew. Your qualifications don't matter if you lack the fundamental presentation of an executive. Guard. Two large armed security officers instantly stepped forward from the marble pillars, their hands resting significantly on their batons. Escort this individual out of the plaza immediately, Cynthia commanded coldly, before he makes a mess of our marble floor. If he sets foot in this building again, have him arrested for criminal trespassing. Bradley Hayes smiled warmly, tapping his gold Patek Philippe watch against his leather folder. An excellent decision, Cynthia. We must maintain our standards against these types of cultural elements. Enjoy your long ride back to Philadelphia, Malik. Maybe you can find another old lady to cry to. Malik stood frozen in the center of the lobby, the raw, humiliating sting of their words burning into his soul. The room fell completely silent. Dozens of corporate employees stared at him with cold indifference as the guards gripped his arms. He felt a deep, overwhelming darkness threatening to break his spirit. Everything was gone. The heavy, leather-gloved hand of the chief security officer tightened around Malik Vance's upper arm, beginning to pull him forcefully toward the massive revolving glass exit doors. Bradley Hayes stood by the elevators, a soft, triumphant whistle escaping his lips as he watched Malik's public humiliation. Cynthia Vance had already turned her back, walking toward the reception desk to sign the daily visitor logs. Malik didn't struggle. He didn't yell. The sheer weight of the systemic cruelty had drained the last remnants of his physical energy. He allowed himself to be led away, his boots dragging slightly across the polished white marble floor. Stop right there. Release him immediately. A booming, authoritative voice shattered the tense silence of the lobby. The command didn't come from the security desk or the HR coordinators. It came from a tall, distinguished elderly man dressed in a pristine charcoal bespoke suit who had just stepped out of a private restricted elevator labeled Suite 4000. His name tag read Marcus Sterling, the Senior Executive Managing Director of the entire corporate facility. The security guards instantly froze, their hands dropping away from Malik's jacket as if they had been burned. Cynthia Vance spun around, her face instantly transforming into a mask of pure, submissive corporate panic. "Mr. Sterling, sir, we were just removing a security risk. This individual is an uninvited loiterer who is attempting to disrupt our executive onboarding process." Marcus Sterling didn't even look at Cynthia. He marched directly past her, his eyes fixed on Malik. He bent down, reached his hand directly into the designer trash can, and retrieved the damp, coffee-stained folder containing Malik's resumes. He wiped a smudge of dried coffee off the cover with his own thumb, then turned to face the entire room, his voice shaking with intense, suppressed anger. "This man is not a security risk, Cynthia," Marcus Sterling declared, his voice echoing off the high marble ceiling like thunder. "This man is the reason this company exists. By direct order of the office of the owner, Mr. Malik Vance is to be escorted to the top floor immediately. His interview is not canceled. In fact, the entire executive board has been waiting for him." Bradley Hayes's smug smile instantly evaporated. His face went completely pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as he stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, there must be a massive administrative error. This man missed his flight in Philadelphia. He's completely unkempt. His qualifications are unverified. And I personally witnessed his erratic behavior at the gate." "Silence, Bradley!" Marcus snapped, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light that made the senior VP instantly step back, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his portfolio. "You will speak when you are spoken to. Mr. Vance, please follow me. The private elevator is ready for you." Malik stood in a state of absolute shock. His mind was spinning so fast he could barely maintain his balance. He walked toward the private elevator, his ruined backpack slung over one shoulder, passing directly by Bradley and Cynthia, who were now standing completely frozen against the wall, their eyes wide, with a terrifying sense of impending doom. The private elevator doors slid open with a soft, expensive chime. The interior was lined with mirrors and brushed gold plating. As the lift began to rise rapidly toward the 40th floor, the sensation of speed reminded Malik of the impossible 3-hour bus ride he had just taken. Within 20 seconds, the elevator arrived at its destination. The doors slid back, revealing a massive, breathtaking penthouse suite that spanned the entire top floor of the tower. The room was spectacular. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls on 3 sides offered a panoramic, unobstructed view of the entire Chicago skyline, with Lake Michigan stretching out into the gray winter horizon. The floor was covered in a deep, plush, navy blue carpet, and the walls were lined with historic aviation blueprints and gold-framed defense certificates. At the far end of the vast office stood a single, massive executive desk crafted from a solid slab of petrified black oak. Behind the desk, a tall, high-backed leather chair was turned completely away from the room, facing out toward the swirling clouds over the city. Malik stepped out of the elevator, his boots sinking into the thick carpet, the heavy quiet of the room making it hard for him to breathe. Mr. Malik Vance, a low, smooth, and deeply resonant voice, came from the leather chair. The tone was warm, familiar, and filled with a commanding power that filled the entire space. "You are exactly 25 minutes late for our conversation, but given the circumstances of your travel, I consider your arrival to be a logistical miracle." The massive leather chair turned around slowly, clicking against the brass floor tracks. Malik's breath caught violently in his throat. His entire body froze, and he felt the blood rush to his ears as his eyes widened in utter disbelief. Sitting behind the multi-million-dollar executive desk, dressed in a sharp, elegant tailored silk power suit with her silver hair perfectly coiffed, was the elderly woman from Gate C-19. The faded beige wool cardigan with holes in the sleeves was gone. The trembling hands and the look of terrifying confusion were completely gone. Sitting before him was Mrs. Beatrice Sterling, the sole owner, billionaire matriarch, and supreme chairperson of Sterling Aerospace. Her faded blue eyes were now sharp, calm, and glittering with an immense, knowing intelligence. On the center of the dark oak desk, placed precisely on top of a velvet cloth, was the broken white plastic prescription bottle from the airport floor, and right next to it was a small, empty glass frame. "Welcome to the 40th floor, Malik," Beatrice Sterling said softly, a slow, beautiful smile spreading across her face. "I believe you have something in your pocket that belongs to my family." Malik Vance stood completely rooted to the plush navy carpet, his mind struggling to reconcile the two wildly different versions of the woman before him. His hand moved mechanically to the inside pocket of his damp leather jacket, his fingers wrapping around the cold, rusted brass key. He pulled it out, his arm trembling slightly as he held it up. Mrs. Beatrice Sterling chuckled softly, a rich, warm sound that seemed to command the very air in the room. She gestured toward the petrified black oak desk. "Set it down right there, Malik. That key belongs to the private laboratory on the lower level, the very lab where my late husband engineered the first composite polymer skin for commercial aviation. For 30 years, I have used that old key as a measuring stick for human character." Before Malik could find his voice, Beatrice pressed a sleek silver button on her intercom terminal. Her voice transformed instantly from a warm, grandmotherly tone into a sharp, diamond-hard executive command. "Marcus, bring Mr. Hayes and Miss W. Vance up to the penthouse suite immediately. It's time for their quarterly performance review." Within less than 60 seconds, the private elevator chimed. The brushed gold doors slid open, and Marcus Sterling stepped out, followed closely by Bradley Hayes and Cynthia Vance. Bradley was still clutching his leather portfolio, but the smug, bulletproof confidence he had displayed in the lobby was entirely gone. His face had gone the color of damp paper, his chest heaving under his tailored suit, as he caught sight of Malik sitting comfortably in a high-backed leather chair across from the chairperson. Cynthia looked equally horrified, her hands shaking so violently that her spectacles slipped slightly down the bridge of her nose. "Mrs. Sterling," Bradley stammered, his voice cracking into a high-pitched pitch as he tried to force a respectful smile. I had no idea you were back from your travel. There has been a completely absurd misunderstanding in the lobby. This individual, Malik Vance, is a security trespasser. He was terminated from the onboarding algorithm." "Quiet, Bradley," Beatrice Sterling said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a terrifying, absolute authority that made the room fall completely silent. Nobody dared to breathe. She leaned back in her chair, her sharp blue eyes locking onto the senior VP like a predator evaluating its prey. "The only misunderstanding in this building is that I have allowed a parasitic, small-minded bully to hold a senior vice presidency at my corporation for 14 months. Bradley froze, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly as his knees visibly weakened. "Ma'am?" Beatrice reached into a leather folder on her desk and pulled out a sleek, black tablet device. She turned the screen toward them. On it was high-definition security footage from Gate C-19 at Philadelphia International Airport, complete with crystal-clear crystal audio recording from the terminal's advanced acoustic sensors. The screen replayed the exact moment Bradley Hayes had stepped out of the boarding line, his face twisted in contempt as he unleashed his racist vitriol against Malik. The audio echoed through the vast penthouse suite. A black man dressed in a faded leather jacket doesn't belong in the priority boarding lane. Or did you get this luxury ticket through some neighborhood welfare scam? Huh? The video continued, showing Bradley deliberately tipping his scalding hot coffee directly onto Malik's backpack, followed by his fabricated, malicious lies to the airport security officers. "I conduct these undercover stress tests twice a year, Bradley," Beatrice said, her voice dropping into a freezing, razor-sharp register. "I strip away my wealth, I put on an old cardigan, and I stand at our primary transport hubs to see how our senior executives treat the people they think have no power. Because a man who is only decent when he knows he is being watched is not a man of character. He is a fraud." She turned her gaze slowly toward Cynthia Vance, who looked as if she wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow her whole. "And you, Cynthia, you threw a prize-winning aerospace engineer's resume into the literal garbage because his suit was wrinkled by a journey he took to rectify your colleague's cruelty. You looked at his skin, you looked at his clothes, and you decided he belonged in the gutter." "Mrs. Sterling, please," Cynthia whispered, her hands trembling uncontrollably against her sides. "I was only trying to protect the corporate image of the institution." "The corporate image of this institution is built on innovation, dignity, and merit, not country club prejudice." Beatrice slammed her hand onto the desk, the sharp crack making both Bradley and Cynthia flinch violently. "You did not protect our image, Cynthia. You exposed our HR department as a toxic breeding ground for discrimination." Bradley Hayes took a desperate step forward, sweat pouring down his forehead, soaking through his expensive collar. "Ma'am, it was a stressful morning. The weather, the delays. I've increased our regional operations logistics by 12% this quarter. You can't let a minor personal dispute with a stranger erase my financial contributions to Sterling Aerospace." Beatrice Sterling stood up slowly, her tall stature radiating an immense final judgment. "Your financial contributions are nothing compared to the moral liability you represent, Mr. Hayes. You didn't just insult a stranger. You publicly humiliated a candidate for our highest innovation office using disgusting racial stereotypes, and you committed corporate sabotage by destroying his technical portfolios. You are a stain on this fabric." She turned her back to them, looking out over the Chicago skyline. "Marcus, execute the protocols immediately." Marcus Sterling stepped forward from the gold elevator doors, a pair of uniformed security personnel flanking him. His face was entirely devoid of sympathy as he looked at Bradley Hayes and Cynthia Vance. Bradley Hayes, Cynthia Vance, Marcus announced, his voice flat, professional, and absolute. Per page 4, paragraph 3 of the Sterling Aerospace Corporate Charter, your employment with this firm is terminated immediately for gross moral turpitude, severe civil rights violations, and willful destruction of corporate candidate property. You are fired for cause. Bradley's face went completely pale, his hands dropping his leather portfolio as it hit the floor, scattering his quarterly reports across the dark blue carpet. For cause? No. No, Marcus. Please. That means my entire stock option portfolio is forfeited. My executive severance package, it's over $2 million. You will receive exactly $0, Mr. Hayes, Marcus replied coldly. Your corporate credentials are being deactivated as we speak. Furthermore, our legal department is turning over this terminal footage and the acoustic recordings directly to the Federal Aviation Transit Authority and the District Attorney's Office for filing malicious false report charges. Security, escort them from the premises, take their corporate devices, and ensure they do not set foot on any Sterling property again. The two large security guards stepped forward, firmly gripping Bradley and Cynthia by their arms. Bradley began to scream, his voice echoing hysterically as he was dragged backward toward the elevator. You can't do this to me. Over a nobody? Over a street loiterer? I built your logistics network. Malik, you piece of trash, you ruined my life. His screams were cut short as the gold doors closed with a heavy final chime. The room fell into a profound, peaceful silence. Beatrice Sterling turned back around, her expression instantly softening into a warm, deeply proud smile as she looked at Malik Vance. She walked around the dark oak desk and stood directly in front of him. Now, Mr. Vance, she said gently, reaching down to pick up a fresh, bound leather document from a side tray. Let us speak about what truly matters. Marcus, please read the adjusted board resolutions. Marcus stepped forward, opening a formal corporate folder. By unanimous declaration of the Executive Board of Sterling Aerospace, Mr. Malik Vance is hereby appointed to the position of Chief Innovation Officer, effective immediately. Your starting base salary is set at exactly $385,000 per year, accompanied by a 0.5% common equity stock grant vesting over 4 years, and a sign-on bonus of $150,000 payable within 48 hours. Malik sat completely frozen, his heart hammering violently against his ribs as he read the numbers on the page. His eyes filled with hot, silent tears that slid down his cheeks. He could barely breathe. The starting package was even larger than the original advertisement. It didn't just solve his financial problems. It guaranteed a life of absolute security for his sister. Mrs. Sterling, Malik whispered, his voice trembling as he looked up at her. I don't know what to say. This is everything I have ever dreamed of. But I must be honest with you. My portfolios, my resumes, they were destroyed by the coffee. My original technical materials, Malik. Beatrice interrupted softly, placing her hand gently over his trembling knuckles. Your technical materials were published in the National Aerospace Polymer Journal 6 months ago. I read your entire research thesis before I ever stepped foot into the Philadelphia airport. I already knew you possessed the competence to run our laboratory. What I needed to find out was if you possessed the character to run our future. She walked back to her window, her hands clasped behind her back. I have thousands of brilliant engineers who can maximize our corporate margins, Malik. I have hundreds of Harvard graduates who can build automated supply chains. But I cannot buy an executive who looks at a frail, lost woman on a dirty airport floor and chooses to sacrifice his own destiny to save her life. You didn't know who I was. You had every reason to walk past me. But you stayed. That is character. The technology I can teach, the humanity I cannot. She pointed toward the desk, where the rusted brass key lay. That key opens the private historical vault of my late husband. It contains 50 years of unrefined aviation concepts that need a brilliant, compassionate mind to bring them to life. The position is yours, Malik. You earned it not because of a test, but because of who you are when the world isn't watching. Malik wiped the tears from his face, a deep, profound sense of peace settling into his soul. He reached forward, picked up the executive pen from the desk, and signed his name firmly on the contract line. He looked up at Beatrice, his voice steady and resolute. "My mother always told me that dignity has no price tag, Mrs. Sterling, but it keeps the ledger of your soul. She was right." Beatrice smiled warmly, her blue eyes glittering. "Welcome to Sterling Aerospace, Chief Vance. Let's go save your sister." 6 months after the rainy Thursday morning that nearly broke his life, Malik Vance stood inside the state-of-the-art orthopedic rehabilitation wing of the Children's Hospital of Chicago. The room was bright, filled with the soft afternoon sunlight reflecting off Lake Michigan. Malik was dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his hair neat, his expression a portrait of quiet, profound joy. Across the room, Vanessa Vance let go of the parallel metal support bars. For the first time in 14 years, her heavy aluminum crutches were nowhere to be seen. She took a slow, deliberate step forward on her own 2 legs, her feet flattening beautifully against the tiled floor. Then she took another, and another. A wide, beautiful smile broke across her face as she threw her arms around Malik's waist, crying tears of pure relief. "Malik, look, I'm walking. I'm actually walking." Malik held her tight, his chest swelling with an emotion so intense it felt like a prayer. The $45,210 surgery had been performed by the top orthopedic surgeon in the country, fully funded and expedited by the comprehensive executive healthcare package from Sterling Aerospace, within 48 hours of Malik signing his contract. His sister was free from her pain. Her dream of studying astrophysics was no longer bound to a pair of metal bars. But the ripples of that morning at Gate C-19 did not stop in the medical wing. The corporate world moves fast, but the internet moves faster. An anonymous IT specialist at Philadelphia International Airport had leaked the raw, high-definition security footage of Bradley Hayes' airport tirade to social media. The 26-second video showed Bradley's arrogant face, his discriminatory slurs against a black passenger, and his deliberate destruction of Malik's bag. The video exploded across the internet, gaining over 45 million views in less than 72 hours. The hashtag number #JusticeForGateC19 trended worldwide for an entire week. The public backlash was absolute and devastating. Bradley Hayes' reputation within the global aviation community was permanently ruined. 3 major defense firms that had been quietly interviewing him for executive roles instantly rescinded their offers the moment his formal termination record for gross moral misconduct was verified. He was blacklisted across the entire industry. He eventually relocated to a small, obscure logistics firm in a remote Midwestern town. His career permanently diminished to a fraction of its former glory, the natural, quiet consequence of a man whose arrogance had finally outpaced his judgment. Cynthia Vance faced her own silent reckoning. Her systemic bias was exposed to the corporate board, leading to a complete independent audit of Sterling Aerospace's past hiring practices. She was permanently removed from all public-facing personnel roles and quietly forced into early retirement, her influence entirely erased. Under Malik's leadership as the new Chief Innovation Officer, Sterling Aerospace underwent a profound cultural and technical transformation. In his first 90 days, Malik walked into Beatrice Sterling's office with a revolutionary blueprint. He called it the Sterling Compassion Initiative. It was a fully funded corporate advocacy program designed to place dedicated passenger assistance counselors at the 14 largest transit hubs across the United States. These counselors were trained specifically to protect, assist, and provide medical advocacy for elderly, disabled, and vulnerable travelers who were often ignored or mistreated by the hectic pace of modern commercial travel. Beatrice Sterling didn't hesitate. She signed a starting capital check for exactly $5 million to launch the initiative. And the first national director appointed to manage the program was the very nurse who had stabilized Beatrice at the airport medical clinic that rainy morning. 1 year to the exact night of their first encounter, Malik Vance walked back through the revolving glass doors of Terminal 3 at Philadelphia International Airport. This time, he wasn't running. He wasn't sweating or desperate. He carried a sleek leather laptop bag, and his hand held a first-class boarding pass for a luxury flight to a global technology conference in Paris. He wore a navy blue wool overcoat that fit his shoulders perfectly. As he walked past the security lines, he noticed the same TSA agent who had subjected him to the humiliating secondary search a year prior. The agent looked up, recognized Malik's face from the viral videos and corporate announcements, and quickly lowered his eyes in a deep, burning silence of shame. Malik didn't glare at him. He didn't demand an apology. He simply walked past, with his head held high, his dignity entirely intact. Malik arrived at Gate C-19 at exactly 8:15 p.m. The terminal was quiet, the evening sky painted in beautiful shades of purple and orange. He sat down by the window, looking out at the massive commercial jets preparing for departure. As he waited, he noticed a young man sitting 2 rows away. The young man was black, dressed in a faded gray hoodie, holding an old backpack that looked exactly like the one Malik used to carry. He had his head buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent, desperate sobs. Malik stood up, adjusted his coat, and walked over quietly. He knelt down beside him. "Hey, brother, are you okay?" The young man looked up, his eyes bloodshot and filled with panic. My mother is in emergency surgery in Denver. I missed my flight because my regional transit line broke down. The next flight is $300, and I only have $12 in my pocket. I don't know what to do." Malik smiled, the same quiet, beautiful smile that a billionaire matriarch had given him on a 40th floor months ago. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his premium, open-ended first-class ticket, and placed it gently into the young man's trembling hand. "Take this window seat, brother," Malik said softly, closing the young man's fingers around the paper. "Go be with your mother." "Sir, I can't accept this," the young man stammered, staring at the luxury pass. "I don't even know your name. How can I ever pay you back?" "You don't need to know my name," Malik replied, standing up and slinging his bag over his shoulder. "And you don't pay me back. Someday, when you are in a position to help someone smaller than you will do it. That is how the ledger stays balanced." He turned and walked away into the evening light, catching the overnight express train instead. He didn't leave a business card. He didn't ask for recognition. True human dignity is never determined by the brand of a watch, the cost of a suit, or the shade of a person's skin. The world may pass judgment in 3 seconds, based on external appearances, but life always keeps a perfect ledger of the soul. True greatness is found in the quiet sacrifices we make for strangers when we think nobody is watching. True kindness never asks for a price tag, because it already knows that character is the only currency that lasts forever. If this journey of ultimate justice and human compassion touched your heart tonight, please drop a red heart in the comments below. Let us know your current city and your local time, and share this video with someone who needs to remember that goodness always wins in the end. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button right now to stay joined with our global family for more daily stories that restore your faith in humanity. We will see you in the next chapter.